So that's how the novel starts. Imagine an archaeological dig site, distant planet. There is desert all around, and there is a group of scientists that are trying to dig out an ancient artifact from an alien civilization that just disappeared. So without further ado, I want to jump into today's video, and it's gonna be a book review. Okay, so today I want to do something different. The goal of this channel is to try to record videos much quicker. Unfortunately, I can't do this, and during the last 3-4 months it became almost impossible to record anything. I guess I will try to cut down on the production value, try to do it much faster, and hopefully this will help me to publish these videos quicker. And I'm also gonna use my notes. So if there's going to be some pauses or something, that's probably that I'm looking at my notes. And with the power of editing, we're gonna cut all those pauses out. So one of the reasons why I like reading is that it allows me to kind of live a lot of different lives. I think George R.R. Martin said that a reader lives 1,000 lives. I'm not sure I've lived 1,000 lives, but it definitely helps me look at something, you know, at life at a different perspective. And there is a little bit of a disappointment connected with that, because sometimes when you're into a book and you're reading it and you heard the reviews and you wanted to learn more about it and you read it, and then you get to like the 50th page and suddenly you realize that you don't really want to live that life, or it's either boring or it's you know, corny, or it's just something that you don't want to listen to. And it's even more disappointing where this voice of the writer, this thinking of another person, is not really on par. It's not really something that you want to continue to listen to. And unfortunately, it happens with me very often when I take a book, I read it like 50 pages, and I drop it. I'm a big fan of dropping books. I don't really like forcing myself into something that I don't really enjoy. But it also makes finding that perfect book that you want to spend some time with very challenging. So I looked up on Goodreads that in 2021 I actually went over 22 books. So I was more or less reading 2 books per month. And among those books, there were a lot of very interesting voices. So I was very fortunate to find a lot of books that I really loved. This year, however, with everything going on in the world, and especially in Ukraine, I didn't really want to pay too much attention and listen to or read kind of more this useful books, right? I don't want to spend my time, usually it's before I go to bed, just reading about something useful, reading more about how the business works, or reading more about how story works. Although those things are very interesting, I want to relax a little bit at the end of the day. And for me, this perfect getaway was a jump into science fiction. So I'm not really a big science fiction fan, but I have read my fair share of novels, and I know my way around Stanislav Lem or the works of Peter Watts. But again, I don't know a lot of them. So what I did is I went on YouTube and I started kind of looking for best of the best lists. And I saw a little pattern there. So some names did come up more often than the others, and there was this British trio that came up time and time again. And the British trio is Alistair Reynolds, Peter Hamilton, and Ian Banks. So I have read a novel by Ian Banks, which has nothing to do with space or his science fiction stuff. It's actually like a very gothic tale, and I read it. Oh my God, I don't wanna I don't wanna say, but it was like maybe 10 or even 15 years ago. Yeah, probably about around that time, maybe even further back. But it was a wonderful novel. I didn't even know at the time that he was a science fiction writer. I thought he was just like an English novelist, but then I figured out he's not really English as well. Then I did buy a book by Peter Hamilton. It's not part of any of his space opera series. It's a separate book. It's called The Great Norse Road, and it's a science fiction kind of crime story. Unfortunately, when I immigrated in the United States, I wasn't able to kind of carry all that stuff with me, so I left it back in Ukraine with my brother, who has a wonderful large library, and he kind of gave it a try, and he read it. He really loved it. So I hope someday I will get back to all the works of Peter Hamilton. But the stuff that I'm really not connected with and I knew very little about was actually the stuff by Alistair Reynolds. I went online and I started looking for whatever he has, and surprisingly I found out that on my Kindle I actually had one of his novels, and this is the first novel in the series, which is called Revelation Space. Revelation Space starts very quickly. It starts like one of those stories. I think it was the Druid, where there's like a train wreck, very dynamic scene. So this starts in a very similar way, but it's not a train. There's no train involved. There's no crash involved. Well, a little bit, but imagine an archaeological dig site in some distant planet. There's desert all around, and there is a group of scientists that are trying to dig out an ancient artifact from an alien civilization that just disappeared. So that's how the novel starts. Well, there is a sandstorm coming, and a group of scientists are debating whether they should stay or go to a safer place. And their leader, who is obviously a crazy guy, says that no, they need to stay because otherwise they will never be able to find this place again. And some of his colleagues disagree and leave. And that's how we slowly start to unravel the mystery around those artifacts. But then the book suddenly makes a wild jump in space and time, and we meet another character, an assassin who was a former soldier. And then we make another jump and we find ourselves on board of a spaceship that is traveling around to an unknown destination. And that's one crazy spaceship. I mean, once you read a little bit about it, all kind of images appear in your mind. Like you start thinking about stuff like Dead Space. You start thinking about the film Event Horizon and all of the other crazy science fiction movies where you have this team of very strange scientists who are trying to do something crazy. So it's a very interesting place, that spaceship. First of all, it's huge. Second of all, it has a lot of different mysteries there. The team members going insane. People are trying to understand how to make things work when there's like very little help outside of like automatic systems and AI. there are rats, there are different places that are filled with some kind of fluid, there are ancient weapons on board of this ship, there are strange crawling vehicles that are connected to that ship, and the ship is like insane, it's very long, there's a lot of stuff in it, very high tech, and that's where we're gonna spend the second half of a novel. But before we get there, there's still a little bit of a journey that you need to take, and that is an amazing journey, and that's why I really like Revelation Space. So I have a kind of like a weird feeling about this novel. So the first, I think 30-40% for me personally felt like I was playing Mass Effect. I was kind of slowly getting into that world, trying to figure out how it works. And the world that Alistair Reynolds created, it's not some kind of a space opera, crazy space. This is not really a space opera, or I wouldn't call it that way. It is very grounded, it's very scientific. Alistair Reynolds himself is an astrophysicist, so he understands how the thing works. He understands how space travel might work. So, for example, like in his world, there's no all the spaceship they travel. They have sublight speeds, right? So they don't travel faster than the speed of light, and that adds a lot of different elements to the whole story and how it progresses in time. And there are a lot of other little elements. Like one of my favorite scenes probably is when the team of that spaceship, they arrive at an unusual space station and they try to find a person to recruit. And they kind of slowly tell about different factions on that space station. And those factions are really people who live in space and currently kind of exploring and making sure that humanity continues to traverse whatever that is in that space, right? And there are a lot of different factions. As I said, there are people who enhanced their thinking and they're half machines. There are people who live underwater, and then there are these people who operate incredible spaceship that can travel from one system to another. And those people, they were born on spaceship. They never had any connection with real gravity, and they look different, like they have a different mindset, their skills are different, and there's not a lot of empathy in them. It's a really crazy world with a lot of different elements there. It's a delight to kind of go into it and try to understand it. So as with any science fiction voice, and Alistair Reynolds is definitely a very strong voice in science fiction, there might come a time where the author just falls in love with his own creation so much that he forgets that he's actually talking to the reader. So Alistair Reynolds can go on and on about how spaceships go on different orbits, or how they travel, or what's going on with different planets, or how the stars are being born and all that kind of stuff. It might be a little overwhelming sometimes. And from time to time I had to take a break because I figured that I didn't really understand anything that what was going on. But it's not as bad as Blindsight. And it's not as bad as some other hard science fiction books. But again, I don't have a lot of experience with it, so it was interesting for me to figure out how this whole thing works. And I did look up a couple of words because I didn't really understand the terminology. Well, one of the cool things about this book and most of the other books that Reynolds writes is that he tries to be a little optimistic. He tries to give humanity a chance and not to paint a very bleak picture of the future. Of course, empires rise and fall wars begin and end. But at the end, humanity sort of stays and tries to continue this journey. I really like one quote from there where he says that humans are one of those species that have this dilemma that they seek solitude, and that's why they go to space. But at the same time, in space, they try to find someone to talk to. This juxtaposition, it doesn't make any sense, right? But at the same time, is one of those things that is so interesting about his books. The Revelation Space is about people who don't really like other people. It's mostly about those loners who find themselves in the very weird situations. But at the same time, they do get together and they solve problems together, and they travel the world and they understand, all the different things that are going on. So I like that it's not really very gloomy. Well, it is kind of gloomy, but it's not really doom and gloom and everybody's going to die and we don't stand a chance. What's the verdict? Does it deserve to be on all of those best of the best YouTube videos and lists? Is it on par with something like Solaris or Blindsight? Well, I don't really think so. I think it's a good book. It's interesting, engaging. There are a lot of interesting ideas. It definitely works as a place where you can hide from the realities that surround us right now. But there's not a lot of philosophy there. There's not a lot of really big things to think about. And maybe some of his other works are better. I haven't read them. If you have read them, please leave recommendations in the comments. And I would love to hear about what science fiction books do you like. Thank you so much for staying till the very end. I really appreciate it. If you have some interesting books that you would like to recommend, please leave them in the comments. And I will try to publish another review soon talking about another science fiction book that I've been reading. See ya. Let me look it up. I'm also on Goodreads, so you can follow me there.